Every cycle builds its own monument. A new market appears, raw and chaotic. A few early winners get rich enough to look like prophets. Then someone arrives with a promise that sounds like safety. Not just profits, not just innovation, safety. That's what FTX sold. Not a coin, not a token, a feeling. A reassurance that the wild frontier had finally found an airport, a control tower, and a set of rules. An exchange with clean branding, fast execution, celebrity commercials, stadium naming rights, and a founder who spoke in calm, antiseptic sentences about risk, math, and doing the most good. And then, in the span of days, it turned into one of the most brutal collapses in modern finance. Withdrawals froze, deals evaporated, bankruptcy arrived. And the people who believed their money was sitting safely behind a screen learned an old lesson the hard way. The lesson isn't that markets are volatile. The lesson is that when trust is the product, trust is also the fuse. Because what happened to FTX wasn't a freak accident. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't bad luck. It was gravity finally remembered. An exchange is supposed to be a marketplace, a place that matches buyers and sellers, keeps records, and guards custody like it's sacred. It's not supposed to gamble. It's not supposed to need confidence to function. It's supposed to function because the assets are there, the books are real, and the rules are enforced. If an exchange needs faith to survive, it's not an exchange. It's a church. And churches collapse the moment believers try to withdraw. FTX rose during a period when almost everyone wanted to believe. The years after easy money flooded the world and speculation became a lifestyle. When risk felt like intelligence. When leverage became normal. When a line on a chart looked like proof of meaning. In those years, crypto wasn't just an asset class. It was a mood. A global lottery ticket mixed with a philosophy. And in a mood like that, the most successful institutions aren't always the strongest. They're the most convincing. FTX was convincing. The interface worked. The marketing was everywhere. The founder looked like the opposite of the usual financial villain. No slick hair, no tailored arrogance, just t-shirts, messy hair, and a tone that suggested this wasn't greed. This was engineering. That image mattered more than most people admit. Because modern trust isn't built through audits and controls. It's built through vibes, through podcasts, through friendly interviews, through the idea that someone who looks like a nerd must be safe. But finance doesn't care what anyone looks like. Finance only cares what happens when everyone asks the same question at the same time. Can the money come out? To understand why FTX was built on sand, it helps to strip away the slogans and focus on the architecture. Beneath the brand was a structure that blurred lines that should never blur. The line between exchange and trader, between custody and speculation, between customer funds and house funds. Standing next to FTX was Alameda Research, a trading firm tied closely to the same ecosystem. Different name, different function, same gravitational field. And that us spies, where the story stops being about a crypto exchange and starts becoming something older and uglier. Because the oldest trick in finance is not stealing with a mask, it's borrowing with a smile. If customer funds sit quietly, they look like an opportunity. They look like idle capital. They look like a river that could be redirected just for a moment, just to cover a gap, just to win a trade, just to survive a downturn, just to make it to the next round. And once that line is crossed, everything becomes conditional. Custody becomes a promise, and a promise is only worth what happens when tested. The spark that ignited the collapse wasn't complicated. It was information. Specifically, the kind of information that turns a confident story into a suspicious one. A report surfaced describing Alameda's balance sheet and pointing to something that should have made anyone with financial memory feel a cold chill. Heavy reliance on FTT, a token created by FTX. This is where the sand starts showing through the concrete. A token like FTT can have legitimate uses, discounts, incentives, loyalty mechanics. But it also has a darker potential. It can become collateral that only looks solid because everyone agrees to pretend. If a company creates a token, holds a lot of it, and then treats that holding as a reliable asset, it is building value out of its own reflection. It's like building a skyscraper using mirrors as support beams. From a distance, it looks like structure. Up close, it's an illusion that depends on nobody leaning too hard. Now add leverage, add borrowing against that collateral. Add the temptation to use customer deposits as fuel. Add a broader market already slipping into a bear phase. Add competitors watching. Add rumors spreading faster than any official statement. And then comes the ancient mechanism that kills institutions faster than any fraud indictment ever could. A run. Bank runs don't begin with facts. They begin with doubt. A question becomes a rumor becomes a withdrawal becomes a screenshot, screenshots become panic becomes a stampede. And the stampede isn't even irrational, it's a prisoner's dilemma written in human behavior. Because once a run begins, the safest action isn't to stay calm. The safest action is to get out first. That's why runs are so devastating. They turn fear into logic. In early November 2022, events moved with the speed of something already brittle. Binance, the biggest rival in the room, signaled it would sell its holdings of FTT. That wasn't just a business decision, it was a flare shot into the night sky. It told the market one thing: confidence was no longer guaranteed. And when confidence is the product, losing it is fatal. FTX faced a liquidity crisis, not a theoretical one, not a we'll settle it next week. One, a real one, measured in hours, measured in withdrawal requests, measured in the sickening gap between what customers believed existed and what could actually be delivered. This is the part of the story where modern viewers often say, how could this happen? But financial history has seen it repeatedly in different costumes. In 1907, a crisis of confidence nearly brought down the American banking system and helped create the conditions for the Federal Reserve. In 2008, runs didn't always happen in physical lines outside bank branches. They happened through repurchase agreements, money market funds, and institutional flight. In every case, the mechanism is the same. A system that assumes withdrawals will be normal dies when withdrawals become urgent. Because fractional systems can survive only as long as not everyone asks for everything at once. If the assets are truly segregated, a run is annoying but not lethal. If the assets are not truly there, a run is a revelation. FTX tried to stop the bleeding with the oldest move in crisis management: find a savior. A rescue deal was floated. A non-binding agreement appeared. For a brief moment, some people hoped the story would end with a bailout and a rebrand. But rescues only happen when there's something solid to rescue. A buyer can absorb losses if the losses are measurable. A buyer cannot absorb a hole if the hole has no bottom. Then the final line arrived, the line that tells everyone the truth without admitting it. Withdrawals froze. And when withdrawals freeze, the mask comes off. Because that's the moment everyone learns what liquidity really means. It means the ability to convert a claim into cash without delay. It means promises can become payment. It means confidence is backed by reality. When withdrawals stop, it means reality has overruled confidence. At that point, the collapse was no longer a rumor. It was a structure falling in public, brick by brick, on live television. On November 11th, 2022, FTX and many affiliated entities filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Leadership changed. A restructuring professional took over, someone known for cleaning up infamous corporate disasters. And what was described afterward sounded less like a cutting-edge technology firm and more like a shipwreck discovered under the surface. Corporate controls were described as astonishingly weak. Record-keeping was described as chaotic. Governance was described in terms that belong in cautionary tales, not in companies handling billions of dollars of other people's money. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable for anyone who wants to believe the collapse was simply crypto being crypto. Because the deeper truth is that the collapse looked like classic financial mismanagement and alleged fraud wearing a modern costume. The internet can change the interface. It cannot change human incentives, and incentives, when unchecked, tend to rot. It's tempting to imagine these failures require genius to pull off, that there must be a brilliant master plan, that the perpetrators must be chess players. But many financial disasters are not chess. They're Jenga, stack blocks. Remove a few to make room. Keep stacking. Tell everyone it's stable. Tell everyone the blocks are insured. Tell everyone the tower is audited, professional, safe. Then hope nobody bumps the table. And if the table gets bumped, blame the bump. But the bump wasn't the cause. The missing blocks were. A strange thing happens in major collapses. The public story shifts from math to morality, from what happened to who deserves what, from balance sheets to courtroom dramas. That shift happened quickly here. A trial followed. A jury reached a verdict. A sentence arrived. 25 years in prison for the founder. That number matters not because it satisfies anger, but because it marks a line the legal system chose to draw. In a world where financial crimes often feel abstract, this sentence was a concrete statement. This was not merely a failed business model. This was not merely bad risk management. This crossed into criminal territory in the eyes of the court. And that distinction is worth holding on to, because it reveals the core taboo that was allegedly violated. In finance, there are countless ways to lose money. But custody is different. Custody is supposed to be sacred. Because custody isn't about risk, it's about trust. And trust isn't a marketing asset, it's a contract with reality. That's why this story struck such a nerve. Not because people didn't know crypto was risky, many did. They accepted price volatility as the cost of being early. What they did not accept was the idea that the exchange itself might be using customer funds in ways customers did not authorize, like a casino quietly reaching into patrons' pockets while the patrons play. A casino can be honest about odds and still be predatory. An exchange that lies about custody is something else entirely. When the headlines faded, the real aftermath began. Bankruptcy is not cinematic, it is slow, it is legal, It is paperwork, negotiations, clawbacks, priority battles, settlement talks, and the grinding question of what can be recovered, from whom, and in what order. This is the long tail most people don't watch, but it's where the real consequences live. Because a collapse doesn't end when the CEO is gone. It ends when the last creditor receives the last dollar they're going to receive. And sometimes it never truly ends, because trust doesn't return on a schedule. As the process moved forward, there were announcements about plans to return funds to customers, to distribute recoveries, to unwind the web. Some customers would see money, some would see less than hoped. Some would see time passing like a second currency, draining value through years of waiting. And this too is a historical pattern. Financial collapses do not only destroy money, they destroy time, they steal years, they trap people inside procedures they don't understand, inside systems that move with legal speed, not human urgency. They force victims to become reluctant students of bankruptcy law, priority claims, and the difference between customer and creditor. All of that can be true and still miss the deeper lesson. The deeper lesson is structural. FTX was built on sand because it relied on things that look like assets until the exact moment they are needed. It relied on confidence instead of controls. It relied on an internal token as a pillar. It relied on the assumption that withdrawals would never become a stampede. It relied on the belief that reputation could substitute for segregation of funds. It relied on the hope that if something went wrong, a bigger player would arrive and absorb the mess. That last point deserves a long stare because it's the hidden religion of modern finance. The belief that size will rescue irresponsibility. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the state steps in. Sometimes the central bank provides liquidity. Sometimes mergers happen. Sometimes creditors take haircuts quietly. Sometimes scandals are buried under complexity. But rescues are not guaranteed. And when the market discovers a structure cannot be rescued, panic becomes ruthless and fast. One of the most dangerous features of modern markets is speed. Not speed of innovation, speed of contagion. Information travels instantly. Withdrawals happen instantly. Fear moves at the speed of a push notification. That changes the shape of collapses. It makes them sharper. It turns what used to take months into days, what used to take days into hours. In the old world, a bank run was a line outside a building. In the new world, it's a surge of clicks. And that means the margin for error is smaller than ever. So what survives when something like FTX collapses? Not the branding, not the celebrity endorsements, not the slogans about building a better future. What survives are the hard, boring principles that have outlived every hype cycle in history. Segregation of funds matters. Independent audits matter. Clear governance matters. Real collateral matters. Transparency matters. And any system that asks for trust without giving verification is not a system. It's a story. FTX was a story with high production value. It was a story that made people feel safe in an unsafe market. It was a story that positioned itself as responsible, regulated, mature. And when stories break, they don't just break wallets. They break belief. That's the hidden cost that never appears on balance sheets, the erosion of faith in institutions, the widening skepticism, the hardening of people who once trusted, the creation of a new generation that will hear the word exchange and instinctively ask, prove it. There's a reason this collapse is already being compared to historical financial scandals, even outside crypto, because the pattern fits. There's always a moment when an institution stops being judged by what it promised and starts being judged by what it can pay. That moment is the tide pulling back. And when the tide pulled back on FTX, what was revealed wasn't a fortress. It was sand, a foundation made of confidence and internal tokens and blurred boundaries, compacted just enough to hold shape in calm weather but never meant to face a storm. That is why the collapse felt sudden. But it wasn't sudden. It was delayed, a slow structural weakness waiting for the right pressure. And once the pressure arrived, the outcome wasn't surprising. It was inevitable. The mistake is thinking this story is about crypto. It isn't. Crypto is the stage. The story is about custody, about incentives, about unchecked power inside opaque systems, about how quickly the world rewards growth and how slowly it punishes recklessness. The story is about what happens when people confuse an app for a vault and marketing for regulation and a founder's calm voice for a balance sheet. Because in the end, money is not just numbers. Money is trust made liquid. And when trust is treated like a resource to be mined, it eventually runs out. So the next time a platform promises safety, the next time a founder claims to be the adult in the room, the next time an exchange sells itself as the stable bridge over chaos, remember the simplest test. If everyone tries to leave, does the door stay open? Because that question is the difference between a structure and a sandcastle. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has the answers. Go find them.